Hello and welcome to Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. I'm Ian Masters, and today we'll examine a number of stories and issues in the news. We'll begin with the White House meeting today between Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio and the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland, which was preceded by mafia threats from Trump that the Danes could do it the easy way or the hard way, because one way or another, Trump is going to own Greenland. Joining us from Copenhagen is Mikkel Runge Olesen, a senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies, where he specializes in Arctic security and transatlantic relations. Then, with Trump poised to bomb Iran amid unconfirmed reports that the Iranian regime has offered Trump an off-ramp by stopping the killings and delaying executions, we'll speak with Dr. Nancy Okail, President and CEO of the Center for International Policy. A scholar and advocate of human rights, justice, peace, and equity, she has over 20 years of experience working on these issues across the Middle East and North African region, as well as globally, and she provides policy recommendations to senior government officials in the US and Europe. We will discuss her article at the New Republic, Military Intervention Will Not Liberate the Iranian People. Then finally, we'll assess the damage about to be done by the return of the fascist troll who, as the world's richest man-child, bought the last election for the Republicans and is about to buy the next, and speak with Jacob SilvermN, a contributing writer for the New Republic and a contributing editor for the Baffler covering tech and national security. He is the co-author of Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud, which was a New York Times bestseller co-authored with Ben McKenzie, and his latest is Gilded Rage, Elon Musk and the Radicalization of Silicon Valley. He blogs on Substack at jacobsilverman.com, and we will discuss his article at The Nation, How Elon Musk Turned Grok into a Pedo Chat Box. The tech oligarch sets a new low for now in the degeneration of online discourse. And before we begin at the start of this new year, which will culminate in the fateful midterm elections in November, polls already indicate MAGA Republicans will lose the House and possibly the Senate. But we're up against a Trump-Miller presidency already drunk with power, and they will do anything to stay in power, having already demonstrated their contempt for the United States Constitution with Trump's January 6, 2001 coup attempt. They see over half of the country as their enemy and have a private army of loyal thugs ready to round up critics of the regime they label as communist lunatics. As Trump cowers the media and his cronies buy up the mainstream press, Background Briefing will continue to expose this malevolent regime's fascistic machinations, providing a daily insight into the news as a massive coalition of people power is mobilized to bring about an end to this nightmare and usher in a new era of reform not seen since Nixon departed the presidency in disgrace. To help save America's 250-year-old democracy, we need all hands on deck, and you can make a tax-deductible donation to help us do our part at backgroundbriefing.org/donate or at publictruthmedia.org. And thank you. And joining us now from Denmark is Mikkel Runge Olesen, who's a senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies, where he specializes in Arctic security and transatlantic relations. Welcome to Background Briefing, Mikkel Runge Olesen.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for joining us. And a meeting took place at the White House between Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio and the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland. A Danish diplomatic source told CNN it could have been a lot worse. Prior to the meeting, President Donald Trump said that anything less than U.S. control of Greenland is unacceptable. And, of course, prior to that, he's been talking about, we're going to take it one way or the other, and, you can either do it the easy way or the hard way, which is total mafia talk. So there's no question that prior to this meeting, there was a lot of bullying rhetoric coming from the United States. But what have you learned in terms of the press conference that followed?
Well, one interesting and quite surprising thing that we learned from the press conference was that apparently the US, Denmark, and Greenland has agreed on setting down a high-level working group to try to see if differences can be resolved. And now I only have the Danish and Greenlandic presentation of this working group, but according to these sources, they say that, according to the press conference, they say that it's going to be a working group that's meant to address the security concerns of the US, while at the same time respecting the red lines of Denmark and Greenland. Chief among those would be that neither Denmark nor Greenland is willing to accept a US takeover of Greenland. And that, if we can get confirmation that this is also something that Donald Trump thinks is a good idea, and that's a big if, but we're waiting to see, then that would, from a Danish and a Greenlandic perspective, be a very good thing to sort of take the debates that have been going on social media, which is not always conducive of what shall we say, constructive compromise, and then move them into a structured setting where we can see if a compromise can indeed be found.
Well, the White House on its X account prior to this meeting shared a cartoon that depicts two dog sleds bearing Greenlandic flags facing two paths. One path has the US flag and the White House under this golden sky, and another leads to this dystopian landscape with the Russian and Chinese flag, and the caption to the post says, "Which way Greenland, man?" So obviously this meeting is not as bad as Zelensky's unfortunate meeting a while back in the White House where they beat up on him. Obviously it was more civilized, but the attitudes that this administration has been expressing are quite, contemptuous in a way. They're arrogant. They're sort of making jokes about it being, the Danish special forces using dog sleds. Well, if the US actually did send its troops there, it would find out the hard way, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And also concerning the dog sledges, it really deserves mention that actually a core Danish Greenlandic strategy for the entire year that this crisis has been going on has actually been to try to prove to the US a willingness to invest more in security, actually totaling 42 billion Danish crowns. That's about 6.5 billion US dollars. So, I mean, Donald Trump has then said, well, Denmark is only prepared to come up with 2 additional dog sledges, but that's some hell of a dog sledge if it costs that amount of money, right? So that's been a core challenge for the Danish and the Greenlandic side in convincing and conveying the message to the US that much more has been spent than just these dog sledges, that Denmark and Greenland is serious about the security concerns and is willing to spend money on it. And also, actually, I just want to add, is stressing that the US is more than welcome to increase its own military presence in Greenland.
Well, it had a big presence in Greenland during World War II.
Exactly.
They actually sent troops in to evict the Nazis from a couple of small broadcasting posts that they had, and then built up airfields and stuff. And then during the Cold War, there were 17 U.S. bases, and they've closed them all except for one. So it doesn't make any sense from looking at the security history. Why would the U.S. feel the need to take over Greenland and complain about its vulnerability to Russian and Chinese encroachment, at the same time close down 16 of the 17 bases? For the life of me, do you have any idea what's really the real agenda here? Because even here in the United States, we're puzzling and scratching our heads trying to figure out, why is Trump obsessed with Greenland?
Sure. And I think this is a question that has been very much at the forefront of Danish and Greenlandic politics for a year now. And I think actually, perhaps in the recent week or two, we might have gotten a bit of a better idea about that. And we've seen Trump go out. We had this interview that Donald Trump made with the New York Times, where he stressed that this defense agreement that Denmark, Greenland, and the US has that is fully in force still, and which allows the US to potentially get much more in terms of military presence in Greenland. That was not enough for Donald Trump. He said that only ownership would do. He talked about his psychological need for ownership. And of course, that's really the most worrying thing of this whole crisis from a Danish and Greenlandic perspective, is that if it's a psychological need of Donald Trump to own Greenland, and he also adds that he will only defend things he owns, then that's very hard to compromise on, because for starters, the Danish government doesn't have the authority to give Greenland away, and the Greenlandic government has repeatedly stressed that it is not keen, it does not want to be part of the US.
Right, and that statement from Greenland's prime minister was met with derision from Trump, saying, who is this guy? You know, I mean, again, the patronizing, arrogant attitude is extraordinary. Now, one explanation from here in the United States, trying to figure out what Trump is up to, is that he's a reality TV guy, and that's what he knows more than anything else. And he governs essentially by stunts, a daily stunt, like a reality TV show. You have to have a cliffhanger and wait for tomorrow's episode.
Sure, yeah.
So there's a good chance that this has more to do with the fact that he wants to get the Epstein story off the headlines, and he's basically, the Department of Justice is defying the Congress by holding up the release of the Epstein files, which is pretty extraordinary. He was just yesterday at a Ford plant in Michigan where a worker yelled out to him, "Pedophile protector," and that really upset him, and he made an obscene gesture, etc. He's got the problem with the American public turning against ICE because of their brutality. He's got all kinds of problems with the economy, particularly with people losing their health care. So it's pretty much an established pattern of his to distract us on trying to steer us into areas of distraction like Greenland. So I guess that may be, from your point of view, preferable. But I mean, I think that, as much as I understand his MO, I suspect that there is also something more to Greenland. Is it to do with his Golden Dome? Does he feel that he has to have Greenland to build his Golden Dome, which again probably will never happen, like a lot of.
And even if it did happen, I mean, if you just asked nicely, I mean, Greenland is already part of the U.S. missile defense, and this is something that both Greenland and Denmark has been happy to sanction. So in that sense, again, we continue to come back to this. Denmark and Greenland are in no way close to choosing Russia or China. Russia and China defined as clear threats towards the kingdom. So in that sense, there's no chance that Denmark or Greenland is going to choose Russia or China. Quite the contrary, Denmark and Greenland is eager to have U.S. help in making sure that Russia and China is not coming to Greenland. So yeah, and I also, perhaps just one thing that I also sort of feel like I got to add is that this thing where Donald Trump criticizes the Greenlandic premier, Jens Frederik Nielsen, for not representing the will of the people. I mean, opinion polls show a massive Greenlandic no to being part of the U.S.
So what's your expectation now following this meeting? Trump, of course, was not at the meeting. It was Vice President Vance, and he's been just as sort of hawkish on it. In effect, we have a peculiar situation where we actually have a co-president in his Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, who arguably has a lot more power and influence than J.D. Vance or perhaps even Marco Rubio, who seems to be more and more in favor with Trump. So the real issue is, who's Trump going to meet with? He doesn't have a particularly good relationship with Denmark's prime minister, right? He's been somewhat insulting towards her. So is this what you expect? I mean, does it come down to the fact that at some point or other Trump is going to show his cards and basically, instead of making threats, at least state some kind of intention or policy?
Well, I think I think at least that would be something that would be easier to work with, right? So I think that from a Danish and a Greenlandic point of view here, I mean, I think what's really going on for the next couple of hours would be frantically waiting to see if that truth social will go out. It will just blow the whole thing up, right? Because actually, the result of today's meeting was not all that was actually pretty good, I would even say. Also, given the low expectations that I think was prevalent on the Danish and Greenlandic side, this idea of a working group, if that working group is allowed to function, then that would be a good thing from a Danish or Greenlandic perspective. But of course, it only takes one truth from Donald Trump to blow the whole thing into pieces, right? So I think there's a big hope that that will not happen. So I think the best thing is probably, okay, very best thing would be that Trump was out there being happy about it. Second best thing would be that there is no truth, that Donald Trump moves on to other things, right?
Well, the one person who'd be happy to see this thing go south, and I'm not even suggesting a military clash between Greenland Special Forces and American Special Forces, but at the end of the day, that's the logical extension of the kind of threats that we're hearing from the United States when Trump says we're going to do it one way or another, or as the mafia says, you can do it the easy way or the hard way, which is, again, quoting him. Putin's got to be thrilled at the idea that NATO will be divided. If anything comes to a head in terms of military action between Denmark and Greenland, wouldn't that be the end of NATO? And that would make Ukraine even more vulnerable and be a complete gift to Putin?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think actually I saw a former advisor to Putin speak on this matter who said remarkably frankly that this was a wonderful thing happening, and Russia was so happy that Europe and the US was fighting over Greenland, that it could possibly lead to the breakdown of NATO. So I think it's completely true that this would be a wonderful gift to Putin if this was to happen. I have no doubt.
So, is there anybody that you know from the Danish perspective that has any sort of sense of how they can get around this problem of Trump so that this thing can be quietened down? I mean, obviously he's a little bit distracted now because he's likely to start dropping bombs on Iran. So that might give Denmark a little bit of reprieve. But it's pretty clear that this is some kind of obsession with him. So is there a Danish strategy apart from being nice?
Yeah, well, I think that this meeting forum, it must have been a Danish idea. I could imagine it doesn't sound very Trumpish, to be honest, right? To have a working group where you can discuss things and try to work it out. So I think that just became a main Danish strategy, a Greenlandic strategy. Other than that, I think continuously going out and debunking claims that Denmark is not and Greenland are not doing anything in the Arctic, continuously coming out with new investments, showing willingness to do so. And also, actually, and I want to stress this, I think there's also a clear point to be made in mobilizing support in Europe for Denmark and Greenland, not because there's any illusions that the Europeans will be able to save Greenland from an invasion from the US, but simply because the one thing they can do is raise the political costs for Donald Trump for doing it. And of course, I mean, the one thing that Denmark and Greenland seems to have going for them in this crisis would be that invasion is deeply unpopular with the American population, and to an extent also in US Congress.
Well, Mikkel Runge, Olesen, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And again, I've been speaking with Mikkel Runge Olesen, who is a senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies, where he specializes in Arctic security and transatlantic relations, and he joined us from Denmark. We're going to take a brief station break. With Trump poised to bomb Iran, we'll look into unconfirmed reports that the Iranian regime has offered Trump an off-ramp by stopping the killings and delaying executions.
Greenland is a barren land, a land that bears no green, where there's ice and snow and the wild fishes blow, and the daylight seldom seen, bright boys, and the daylight seldom seen.
Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now, Dr. Nancy Okail, who's President and CEO of the Center for International Policy, a scholar and advocate of human rights, justice, peace, and equity. She has over 20 years of experience working on these issues across the Middle East and North African region, and as well as globally. And she provides policy recommendations to senior government officials in the U.S. and in Europe. And she has an article at the New Republic, Military Intervention Will Not Liberate the Iranian People. Welcome to Background Briefing, Dr. Nancy Okail.
Thank you for having me, Ian.
So we're just learning, since Trump is poised to bomb Iran, that there's unconfirmed reports that the Iranian regime perhaps has offered Trump an off-ramp by stopping the killings and delaying executions. Trump said that the killings in Iran are stopping. There's no plan for executions. He said, I'm sure if it does happen, we'll be very upset, but that's just gotten to me. They're not going to have executions. It's not clear that he's not just referring to the one execution of Irfan Sultani or executions in general. But do you have any more on this?
I don't know. I mean, we've just heard this from President Trump. We don't have clear access. As you know, the internet blackout in Iran is still on, and it's very hard to verify that. He also said that they have told him, and they reference to the source from Iran that he's referring to is from authority, that the Iranian regime was shooting, and there was a shooting back at them, so they made it appear they were killing each other. So it's not somehow referencing the talking points of the regime. So we don't know what's going on. I mean, of course, the biggest concern and the most important thing is to hope that the Iranian people are really going to have all that massacre stopping, the massacre and the killing and the blackout stopping. I just don't know how this would be stopping the protests and abrupt, complete, silence about what happened. And again, this is a regime already have a blood on their hands, but again, always take what Trump says with a grain of salt. That could be his way for an off-ramp from feeling that he's trapped to have to launch strikes because of what he had said before, that if the regime starts killing, there will be a retaliation. And again, it could be also a tactic from his side to dupe the Iranians and have an action that is that seems to or would be a surprise for the regime. Because while he's saying that, there are also some indications in the region that there is some sort of heightened security alert. Some European countries are calling their people to leave, and some flights have been canceled. And again, we've heard the advice for some non-mandatory personnel to leave the air base in Qatar. So you are having multiple signals and multiple and different signals also from Trump himself.
Well, you, of course, were in Egypt at the time of the Arab Spring and the removal of Mubarak, the short-lived Arab Spring, as it happened. And the Saudis were the ones that brought back Sisi and the generals. They did everything they could to sabotage the Muslim Brotherhood, who took over temporarily. So the fact that the Saudis are not happy, I mean, they are there right there in that region. How much is that to do with the fact that they don't like popular government? They don't like democracy. They like autocracy. And presumably, if this clerical regime in Iran were to fall, there'd be some semblance, one would hope or think, of democracy.
Well, we don't know that if the regime indeed falls. Obviously, it's becoming more and more vulnerable every day. But we don't know what would replace it. Would it be replaced by another regime that is friendly to the West and friendly to the Gulf countries? Or would it be all the way to having a real democratic change with people who are prioritizing Iran's development, progress, and democratic transition? So this is, of course, I mean, this is going to be taking so long if we ever see that, but there's a range of options, and I think that for the Gulf, they don't want to take chances. They would rather have that stable regimes that they have in like the recent years. They have normalized their relationship with Iran, so they don't see it as a threat as much as they see that actually the threat coming from Israel, and the extent to which the rhetoric of the greater Middle East and redrawing the structure, the power structures in the Middle East, in addition of the strike that Israel conducted on Qatar last year, which changed a lot of calculus, because for a long time the Gulf has understood or believed that the United States can rein in Israel and control its action. However, this has proved the opposite, and showing that Netanyahu is becoming more and more rogue and acting unilaterally and embarrassing Trump into joining what he's doing, again, because Trump doesn't want to look like that he is a follower, or that something was happen behind his back or against his recommendations or instructions.
Well, in your article, you point out that there's a credibility gap in U.S. foreign policy, and that there's a pattern in which the language of human rights and democratic solidarity is invoked selectively, embraced when it aligns with geopolitical aims, and quietly abandoned when it becomes inconvenient. And of course, the glaring example is the human rights catastrophe in Gaza, which we didn't say much about, compared to the outrage that's being expressed justifiably about what the Iranian clerical regime is doing to its own people. So it would seem that since Israel is championing the crown prince, the Shah's son, that seems as if we haven't learned much. But on the other hand, Trump has said that he's not ready to meet with Reza Pahlavi. So where does that stand in your opinion, Nancy?
Again, like we don't know what Trump's plans are. It changes, and the narrative changes, as we saw what happened also in Venezuela. And thank you for bringing that point about Gaza, because I think it would be a mistake to look at what's happening right now, whether in Iran or in Venezuela, or the threats to Greenland, in separation from what happened in Gaza, and the hypocrisy of the United States and the international, community in general, and leadership, seeing this happening and violating international law, and the so-called quote unquote rules-based world order, and undermining this. This is what brings us to the point that we are at right now. This unilateral, aggressive, reckless behavior from the United States with the leadership of Trump. And again, like we saw that Some people are obviously happy to not see Maduro, a dictator who's done everything to weaken its country and repress its people. They don't want to see him there, but obviously that would not mean by what Trump, I mean, like the strategy that Trump had, like that surgical strike, that just getting him out means that a regime change or any help, particularly into a democratic development in Venezuela. The same thing applies in Iran. We don't know whether they are planning to parachute someone and put them there as to maintain like a puppet, Western-friendly government there, and if that is even possible, because the situation and the context of Iran is completely different than Venezuela, and the possibilities of infighting, and what people are worried about the most is the Syrianization of Iran, which is going to be a huge security threat for the entire region.
Well, one of the rare occasions that one can praise Donald Trump, at least from my mind, is that he is unconventional in the sense that the U.S. has always had this completely dysfunctional foreign policy where unless you agree with our preconditions, we won't talk to you, which has isolated us around the world. We have no diplomats in Iran, for example, whereas the Europeans still have diplomats there. So they presumably, at least I don't know whether Trump, what kind of intelligence he gets, but presumably the Europeans are providing accurate intelligence. I'm not sure where we get our intelligence from, except from perhaps Israel. So, my understanding is, for example, recently Trump had many conversations with Maduro on the phone before he was ousted. Is he also going to do that with Pezeshkian, the president, the Iranian president?
We don't know. There are news that he is willing to meet with him, which is that it's going to be big. But again, I mean, like that does not necessarily mean that he is going for a deal or a negotiation, because if you remember back in June, when the United States struck Iran, it was days within the Iranian delegation was ready to sit at the table and agreeing to sit at the table to have a new deal that replaces the JCPOA that Trump got out of back in in his first term.
Well, you have also written in the article at the New Republic, military intervention will not liberate the Iranian people, that it means that rejecting war is not indifferent to state violence. It means pursuing accountability through international mechanisms, calibrating sanctions to reduce civilian harm, protecting information flows and internet access, and sustaining diplomacy rather than substituting military force for politics. So what about the possibility of the UN's 2005 R2P responsibility to protect? I mentioned that the Europeans at least have representatives inside of Iran. Is there any, the US has unilaterally acted and given a backhand to the UN and other international fora, but is it possible that the Europeans and the UN can assert itself in this situation?
Well, as I wrote with my colleague Sina Tusi, the Center of International Policy, in that article, like in normal circumstances, yes, that should have been and must have been the case. However, as I just mentioned, is like everything that's been happening over the past years, the unauthorized military action, what's happening in Gaza with zero accountability, the threat to the UN and the threat to the ICC, these are all indications of how this entire multilateral system has been undermined. Adding to that the UN is already facing a lot of pressure from the United States, including, for example, withdrawing recently from 66 agencies and taking away resources. So the United States, can just also, ignore whatever the United Nations is trying to do and continue to even have punitive actions and weaken it more and withdraw funds and basically render it irrelevant or obsolete. The European also are trying as much as possible not to be in confrontation with Trump. They are already dealing with the issue of Greenland and that what means for the entire region in Europe. So I would think that they would hesitate to take any actions that would seem to be sort of in defiance of what Trump plans for Iran are.
Well, just in closing, yesterday I spoke with Ray Takei at the Council on Foreign Relations in Georgetown, and he suggested that many commentators and observers who have suggested that if you start bombing Iran, the people will rally around the flag. He didn't believe that necessarily applies here, that there's no evidence in past incidents. What's your take on that, Nancy?
Well, I mean, the biggest gift for any dictator or any authoritarian regime is the external enemy. I mean, sometimes they even invent it if it's not there. But yes, it is there. There's a real threat. At the same time, we know two things. We know that, I mean, the bombing would give the regime the justification of cracking down on further on the people in Iran who are demonstrating for very legitimate reasons and frame them as foreign agents and take actions as far as hanging them for treason and every other narrative. At the same time, we also know that when the regime starts being more and more aggressive and taking further actions, it's not a sign of strength. It is actually a sign of vulnerability. I mean, this is like becomes more a survival mechanism of seeing that there's much less to lose than if they don't act at all. And the regime has been weakened, particularly after the strikes in June, not because of that, but because of the continuing, I mean, failure of the government to respond to people's grievances. So with or without the strike, the regime is already very vulnerable. They may come back from that. Maybe there is a chance that those protests would just like recede or become less in numbers and weaker. But there's one thing that is clear, that there's no turning back to the way they were, because even if there are no bombs, which we hope doesn't happen, the regime already doesn't have the tools or the political will to respond to those grievances, which are real. I mean, it's like the economic decline, the water crisis, the repression, all these things remain the same, and they wouldn't be able to restore it. They were not able to restore it before, even more now, where they will be weaker, plus they have blood on their hands.
Well, Dr. Nancy Okail, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Ian, for having me.
And again, I've been speaking with Dr. Nancy Okail, who's President and CEO of the Center for International Policy, a scholar and advocate of human rights, justice, peace, and equity. She has over 20 years of experience working on these issues across the Middle East and North Africa, as well as globally, and she provides policy recommendations to senior government officials in the US and Europe. And she has an article at the New Republic, Military Intervention Will Not Liberate the Iranian People. We're going to take a brief station break and back with an assessment of the damage about to be done by the return of the fascist troll, who, as the world's richest man-child, bought the last election for the Republicans and is about to buy the next. Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is Jacob Silverman, a contributing writer for The New Republic and a contributing editor for The Baffler, covering tech and national security. He's the author of Terms of Service, Social Media and the Price of Constant Connection, and the co-author of Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, The Golden Age of Fraud, which was a New York Times bestseller, co-authored with Ben McKenzie. His latest book is Gilded Rage, Elon Musk and the Radicalization of Silicon Valley. And he blogs on Substack at jacobsilverman.com and has an article at The Nation, How Elon Musk Turned Grok into a Pedo Chatbot. The tech oligarch sets a new low for now in the degeneration of online discourse. Welcome to Background Briefing, Jacob Silverman.
Thanks for having me.
So Elon Musk is a continuing menace on so many different levels. But I must say, I know it's not necessarily related, but do you recall years ago when a bunch of Thai school children got trapped in a cave that flooded and a British rescue team went in, and it was quite complicated to get these kids out. And at that time, the hero, this British guy who got the kids out, Musk called him a pedophile for no apparent reason. And he said the guy's a pedo. And here he is now with his AI outlet, chatbot, Grok, producing more than 6,600 sexualized images per hour. And you've written about it, obviously. So what's going on with this guy and pedophiles? From accusing somebody of being a pedophile, wrongly, of course, to now generating a bonanza for pedophiles.
Yeah, I mean, everyone who's in some way in the MAGA elite ends up being around pedophiles, it seems, in the end. What's happening basically is that Musk, in the name of free speech or of anything goes, is allowing people to use Grok, this image generator that he has, to make sexualized imagery, including removing people's clothing, putting them in bikinis, and also people have been sort of trying to game it to basically make people appear nude, saying you put someone in a translucent bikini or something like that. And this has been done to a lot of people unwillingly, to images of people, and also to inanimate objects like toasters, but also images of children. And this is something that X and Musk know about, that's happening, at a very big scale, and with a kind of tool that is much more powerful than what's generally out there. And of course, it's plugged into X, this massive social network that still helps drive the news cycle a lot. So this is something that started as sort of an obscure activity, or people trying to use Grok to do this in December, and has really exploded over the last few weeks. And if anything, Musk seems to have doubled down in the way that he often does. He's accused various governments of trying to censor him. He posted a photo of British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in a bikini, and then they made the feature part of their $8 a month premium subscription, which basically just puts X in the business of monetizing sexualized imagery of young children.
Well, it wasn't one of the targets, one of his children, because the mother of one of his 14 children, Ashley St. Clair, she has gone public.
That's right. And she is someone who, perhaps alone among the mothers of his children, has really turned against him publicly. And she said that she and her child were depicted in this way by people using this service. And there are things that the company could do, both to limit this kind of capability in the AI, and then to limit the spread of these images on X. And by a law that, according to a law that Trump signed last year, the Take It Down Act, companies like X are supposed to have protocols or mechanisms by which users can request that material of them, especially of this kind of nature, be taken down. And those methods obviously don't exist right now. There's nothing really that anyone can do, even the mother of one of Musk's children, except say something on social media or complain to reporters. And that's really where we're at right now. And there's a lot more that could be done, but again, in kind of typical Musk fashion, he's defensive, retreating, and claiming that that we need this somehow. This is part of also what he calls spicy mode for the Grok AI. I mean, it is in some way or important to Musk that his AI be a little more unhinged and which to him is equated with truth seeking and anti-woke than all the others. So in a way, I don't know if Musk I think in a way this is kind of consistent with what Musk has advocated for. I mean, we've seen his AI go rogue before and dub itself a Nazi and unspool these horrible rape fantasies. So this is of a piece with that.
So you mentioned the Take It Down Act, which was sponsored by Texas GOP Senator Ted Cruz. It's also supported by Melania Trump. So she seems to have quite a bit of influence over Trump, if anybody does. I think he's almost afraid of her. So what do you think can be done here? I mean, I thought Trump and Musk had sort of made up a little. And we know that Musk is now pouring money into the Republican caucus to help them hold on to the House in November, which may require a lot of money. But he bought the last election for the Republicans, so apparently he's going to buy the next one. So to that extent, he's helping Trump. What's the status of their relationship?
I think it's largely repaired. Musk has been donating to kind of established GOP PACs and organizations. The America Party that he once promised is not coming through, and I'm not sure if even the America PAC that he started will do much. Certainly, I don't see him doing much to challenge kind of mainstream MAGA or Trump or GOP prerogatives. Maybe he'll support someone like Thomas Massie, who Trump doesn't really like. But right now, the relationship seems to be good, especially in the sense that Musk continues to get new contracts from the U.S. government, including for Grok, this ridiculous chatbot that we're talking about, getting contracts with the Department of Defense. Pete Hegseth was talking about it this week. They're supposedly integrating Grok across military networks. Now, there was supposed to be something similar in other parts of the federal government, but somehow someone put the brakes on and said, we need to do some more safety testing on these AI systems, so it hasn't been fully implemented. But you might see something different with the military. So, I think as long as those contracts are still flowing, the relationship seems good. I don't see Trump doing anything about this problem. Certainly, no regulator on his behalf, unless, and this is not a suggestion, but unless people are posting, undressed photos of Trump or something like that. Other than that, I don't see him caring.
The very thought of that makes me feel ill, actually. So, in other words, it's okay for Musk to spread fascist memes and be pro-Nazi and make the Nazi salute and all that stuff. That doesn't get him in trouble with anybody in MAGA world. But is this getting him in trouble, Grok? Is this a bridge too far? If he's
not that I've seen yet.
Really? Even Melania hasn't said anything?
Perhaps I missed something today, but I don't really think so yet. Again, until it feels sort of personal for some Republican leaders, I don't think they'll really say anything. Musk is a pretty, big person to cross from their end, and they are certainly all afraid of him or his money in one way or another. We have seen some other important world governments in the European Union say they're launching investigations into the company. The one thing that I think could sort of move the needle or do something is if Apple and Google kind of said we've had enough, or it became too embarrassing for them to be complicit in this, and they, as some Democrats have requested, if they would ban the X and Grok apps from their app stores. I mean, that would make a huge difference to the company's, to X's business, and it's something that has been threatened before with some of X's various violations of terms of service and various rules. I mean, right now, X is both violating the law with the Take It Down Act and who knows what else, and also violating the terms of its own terms of service and the terms of service of these app stores. And basically, two app stores dominate the internet. So, it's really only the other oligarchs or the other monopolies that could do something if they wanted to.
Well, last summer, Grok dubbed itself Mecha Hitler, and it had all kinds of racist, horrible rape fantasies. and then it started to attacking the CEO that Musk had hired to sort of window dress X, Linda Yaccarino, and then she left the company right thereafter. So is this outrage fatigue we're talking about here? Is it?
There may be some of that. I mean, when is enough enough? Or, there are so many kind of micro or mini scandals with Musk that it can be sort of hard to adjudicate what really matters. I think a lot of the people around him are just kind of happy to enable him or until the wheels fall off, perhaps. And there are fewer and fewer checks around him, and whether we're talking about kind of boards of directors or investors or people who could really say something to him to change his behavior. I mean, those increasingly are pretty light. And obviously the political landscape could not be more favorable for the way he acts and what he wants to do. So, until something truly disastrous happens, I guess. I mean, this would be, for any other tech company, this would be a major scandal and, instant lawsuits and plunging them into arguments with regulators and all kinds of stuff. But for Musk, it's kind of another week at the office.
But this Mecha Hitler thing, when you consider he did the Nazi salute twice early in celebrating Trump's re-election, and there's nothing ambiguous about what he did then. That was quite deliberate. And all of his statements that have followed, what is it about Hitler and him? Is this part of his trolling nature to get us all upset and outraged, or is this genuine affection he has for Adolf Hitler?
Yeah, I think at a certain point you have to say it's not just trolling. I mean, this is a reflection of who he is, and this is why I said in my article for The Nation that a fascist plutocrat has built a fascist media network and chatbot, and I think that's the way it largely flows. That that tools and technologies often reflect their creators. And we know that Musk himself has frequently intervened in the development of Grok and told people to emphasize certain characteristics or to essentially make it more outspokenly right-wing. And Musk has spoken in public about kind of, he's one of these Roman Empire guys, really likes a Caesar type figure, would like that for the United States. So, I think by now it's fair to call the guy giving fascist salutes and spreading fascist chatbots a fascist, and I think that's sort of a helpful guiding line, and that's what he is, and how he operates.
And his ketamine intake is not a sort of factor involved in his pro-Nazi outbursts?
I think it's a factor in his chaotic behavior, perhaps, or his lack of restraint, and maybe his egoism. I mean, though he has plenty of reasons for that, but it can have psychiatric effects in that way. But I don't think it makes someone sort of this authoritarian right winger. I think he would probably have that without the drugs. But I think if the wheels fully come off, I think his ketamine use would be a contributing factor.
Well, Goering was an addict too, right?
A lot of high-ranking Nazis were, as that book Blitzed, I think it's called, has shown. But they were on all kinds of uppers.
Right. Well, I think the chief of staff, Susie Wilds, referred to him as a ketamine addict, and he's an odd duck. By the way, she has disappeared. Have you noticed?
Yeah, not giving many interviews now. I mean, I think it would be a very hard story to report, but there would be something very interesting to read about. A deep look into drug use among both the Silicon Valley elite and also the Trump elite. I mean, especially in the last White House with Ronnie Johnson, that doctor who's notorious for being a pill pusher in charge. I mean, there's a lot of drug use. I mean, this is happening in a lot of elite circles. It's not necessarily partisan, but we know that, and I know from talking to some people in tech that, it's a lot of CEOs, not just Musk, who are taking things, and some of them perhaps with more care or discernment than others. But, it is a factor in some of these people's behavior.
So just in the last couple of minutes then, is there any way to stop this man buying the next election? Because, I mean, to me, that's the most serious part of it all. There is not, it's obviously disgusting who he is and what he says and what he believes and how he's spreading Nazism and fascist ideas and trying to turn the country to the far right as possible. So that's pretty toxic. But the political interference is one thing to influence people, and obviously buying, $45 billion or whatever he spent to buy X has been a massive boost for the far right and for the Republicans. And he's obviously helped move them to the far right. So is there anything that can stop him from, obviously Citizens United have opened the floodgates, but is there any naming and shaming? I mean, I'm surprised that, for example, that the Democrats haven't made more out of the fact that he bought the last election for them.
Yeah, I think that's been a huge lost opportunity and mistake on their part. I think the Democrats have had this sort of unhealthy attitude that things may swing the other way, whether in the midterms or in 2028, and then some tech elites will be on their side again, which, you know, maybe in the case with someone like Mark Zuckerberg, who just goes wherever the wind blows. But, you know, I would argue that these people are really their political adversaries right now and have crossed some serious Democratic lines that we haven't seen before. And of course, most emphatically Elon Musk. And they need to be prepared for that, and prepared that, yeah, given Citizens United, an incredible amount of money is going to flow from Musk, and also from people like Timothy Mellon, the kind of semi-reclusive heir to the Mellon banking fortune, who donated pretty much just as much money, but maybe not as much of his own, you know, personal celebrity, and he didn't have a social network. But those kinds of people are going to be back and donating hundreds of millions of dollars on behalf of the Republicans. And, you know, I don't know how to run a political campaign, but I know that you have to respond to that or prepare for that in some way, in both how you campaign and the use of alternative media and media networks. And, you know, that perhaps one way to do that is not to be on X and fight Musk on his own turf.
Well, Jacob Silverman, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Glad to do it.
And again, I've been speaking with Jacob Silverman, who's a contributing writer for The New Republic and a contributing editor for The Baffler, covering tech and national security. His latest book is Gilded Rage, Elon Musk and the Radicalization of Silicon Valley, and he blogs on Substack at jacobsilverman.com and has an article at The Nation, How Elon Musk Turned Grok into a Pedo Chatbot. The tech oligarch sets a new low for now in the degeneration of online discourse. And this has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters, and I'd like to thank producers Graham Fitzgibbon, Asher Price, and Sasha Linden-Cohen. If you missed any of today's program and would like to explore our vast archives, you can find us at backgroundbriefing.org, where we include extended interviews, searchable by topic, and have made it easier for you to sign up for daily email updates and provide links to resources, articles, and books discussed on the program. Also, you can find links there to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we highly encourage your ratings and reviews on these platforms. Find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook at Ian Masters Media, and our new social media manager, Luke Susswood, is also posting highlights from the show on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Ian Masters Media. So please do help us reach more listeners by sharing this program with friends, family, and colleagues. And to help sustain this program into the future and ensure it remains free to all, please take a moment to support us by going to backgroundbriefing.org/donate and/or at publictruthmedia.org, where your tax-deductible donations, large and small, keep us broadcasting. And I'll be back tomorrow with another Background Briefing at backgroundbriefing.org. Bye for now.
One more light goes out.